Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we will continue to read the story about a man who his father's wife toxic behaviors, and it isn't until she attacked his child over a wedding dispute that the man snapped. In case you haven't seen part 2 or both part 1 and 2 of this story, I recommend you to watch it in our channel to understand the story. Let us get started. I didn't want to write another post, so I'll just add this here. My stepbrother called me earlier today. Apparently, he and my stepmother had a fight, and he wants to meet up. I agreed as long as it was just the two of us. We're meeting up for coffee on Wednesday. I have no idea what to expect, but even if he does apologize, I need to know he understands how and why he let us down. I wasn't about to just forgive him without any real reflection on what had happened, especially considering how much pain and chaos his mother had caused our family. She wasn't the only one to blame, but her influence on him and his refusal to see the truth for so long was deeply hurtful. I wasn't sure I was ready to talk to him again, but I also knew I had to at least listen. He had a part in this, just like she did. Our relationship had always been strained, mostly because of her. She'd manipulated him for years, making him believe whatever she wanted, twisting his perception of reality. It wasn't just the big things, like her treatment of Ethan or her blatant disregard for Sophie and me. It was the small things, too. The constant undermining, the gaslighting, and the way she made him feel guilty for not being her ideal version of a son. I used to think he was just a passive bystander in all of it, but now I was realizing that he'd let himself be complicit for far too long. I had to know if he could finally take responsibility for that. The coffee meetup was scheduled for Wednesday, and by the time it rolled around, I wasn't sure what to expect. I had my guard up. I wasn't going to let my stepbrother waltz in and make excuses for his mother's actions. Not this time. I needed to hear that he'd seen things from our perspective, that he finally understood why we had to cut them off. Sophie and I had made the decision to go no contact with my dad and stepmother after everything that happened with Ethan, and I wasn't about to let this meeting undo that. I'd given them chances to change, to show real remorse, but nothing had ever come of it. Still, I agreed to sit down with him, and I hoped this conversation would be the start of real healing. At least, for him and me. The first few minutes of our conversation were awkward, as expected. We sat in a small, quiet cafe, both unsure of how to begin. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to gauge his mood, his sincerity. He looked tired, really tired, and not just from the fight with his mother. I could see the weight of the past few months on his face. He knew the truth now. He knew what his mother had done to Ethan and what she'd tried to do to Sophie and me. She'd gone too far this time. But could he really face it? Could he accept what he'd been a part of, however indirectly? I didn't know. Look, he started, breaking the silence. I know I messed up. I know I let you down, and I've been thinking a lot about it. I didn't say anything right away, just waited for him to continue. I've talked to my therapist about it. We've gone over everything. I used to think you were exaggerating, that maybe you were overreacting, but after the fight with Mom, I get it now. I should have seen it earlier. I should have known better. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was a start. I let him keep talking. She's been controlling my whole life. I didn't even see it. All I could see was what she wanted me to see. But when I found out what she'd been doing, everything clicked. I realized how much she had manipulated me. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He paused, looking down at his hands. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look this vulnerable, and I had to admit I was a little surprised. But I wasn't ready to forgive him just yet, not until I knew for sure that he understood the gravity of what had happened. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now, he continued. I just wanted to let you know that I'm finally seeing things clearly. I'm not going to defend her anymore. I won't pretend she's the victim. She's hurt you and Sophie and Ethan too many times, and I should have stood up for you. I'll do whatever I can to make it right. That was all I needed to hear. He was finally owning up to his part in everything. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't fix everything overnight, but it was a start. It was the first real step he'd taken toward healing our relationship, and that was worth something. I didn't know if it was enough yet, but it was progress. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. But it's not just about words, it's about actions. You've got a long way to go to make things right, not just with me, but with Sophie and Ethan too. And I won't pretend that it's all going to be okay overnight. But this is a good first step. He nodded, and we sat there for a while, talking more about what had happened and how we could move forward. It was slow, but I could see that he was genuinely trying to change. By the end of our conversation, I felt a little lighter. I then rescheduled the meetup with my stepbrother and Sophie, leaving for our honeymoon on Friday. We decided that no matter the outcome of my conversation with my stepbrother, I didn't want to spend the whole trip thinking about it. Sophie and I had been through enough stress in the lead-up to the wedding, and we deserved a break. We didn't need to keep carrying the weight of my family's drama with us on our honeymoon. He understood, and we're going to talk when I'm back. I wanted to focus on Sophie, on us, on building our life together without the constant distractions of my family's mess. After our coffee meeting in August, my stepbrother and I started meeting up more regularly. We'd sit down for lunch or coffee, talking about the things his mother had done, about what she'd put me and Sophie through, and most importantly, about how he could begin to make amends. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but we were both willing to put in the work. It wasn't just about me. It was about him, too. He had to process his own guilt and shame over the way he'd been manipulated. In October, Sophie joined us for a few of our meetups. The kids saw him again for the first time 2 weeks ago, and though things were a little awkward at first, they warmed to him again. They could see that he was genuinely trying, and it was a relief to finally have him back in our lives, even if it was only on the fringes. Slowly but surely, the trust between us was starting to rebuild. In early November, my stepbrother made the decision to cut contact with my stepmother for good. It wasn't easy for him. He'd grown up with her, after all. But it was necessary. He couldn't keep enabling her behavior anymore. He needed to set boundaries, not just for himself, but for the sake of his own mental health, and he was finally doing it. The kids are doing amazing. Ethan turned 5 in September, and our baby will be 2 in early February. Sophie and I are spending the holidays with her family in Brazil, away from the drama of my side. My stepbrother, meanwhile, is staying with his girlfriend, focusing on his own healing. It's been a long journey, but we're getting there. Things are great. That's all. I'm signing off for now. That's the end of this story. Leave your comments in the comment sections to tell us how you feel about this story. And I will see you in the next video.